Thunder Bay's expert panels working on the Police Services Board, and they've issued an interim report. Here's the story.
Bonjour. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome to Thunder Bay.
Yes.
So we've been working on this for almost 3 decades now on this issue.
Yes.
And you were here in 1993.
That's correct. In the 1990s, I was the Vice Chair and Acting Chief Commissioner of the Ontario Human Rights Commission. And I was invited to come here in March of 1993 to talk about the urgency of dealing with racism in our communities. It was on March 21st, the International Day for the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. And I spoke to a large gathering of the city's powerful, the mayor, the police chief, the university president, board of trade people, cross-section of those who wield power in the city. And my topic was that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And that was in 1993, which coincidentally is also the year in which the community, indigenous community of Thunder Bay, through its grassroots committee on mass graves, issued a report. Yes, we are talking about certain issues that have been in this city for a long time.
And with the new issues that have arose in those 30 years, you know, when we're talking about the residential school and child welfare, you know, Marie Sinclair saying the new monsters and child welfare now. All of this that's coming about, is that going to be included in with your report?
They are not part of the interim report, which I'll be giving to the board, Thunder Bay Police Services Board tomorrow. But we'll have to look at those issues and for our final report later, a few months later. Our plan is to give that report to the new Thunder Bay Police Services Board sometime in January. So yes, I mean, we have been holding consultations. We have met as much as we could with members of the community, leadership of the First Nations, both in the First Nations and in the city. And we have a fairly good idea of what are the deep issues here and what kind of policing is needed to address those issues and who else needs to be involved in addressing those issues. So yes, in the final report we will be dealing with the challenges or the barriers or the obstacles that get in the way of people experiencing safety, people experiencing inclusion, people experiencing respect. So I think we'll have to go there.
Yes, I think community engagement.
Yes.
We need to see a lot more community engagement. Are we going to be seeing that?
Yes. See, there's a conversation that is going on beyond Thunder Bay about the need to do policing differently. We talk about community-based policing. And community-based policing does not simply mean holding festivals and fairs and ceremonies. Those are important. But community-based policing means how do you engage with the community? How do you pay attention to the needs and expectations and values of the community? How you approach needs of the community from a perspective of safety and wellness as opposed to law enforcement. So we'll have to lay that out in the final report. What does community engagement mean?
Yes.
You know, it's not PR.
Yes. Is it police officer or is it peace officer?
I'm a big supporter of the peace officer concept. I'm a big supporter of applying the tenets of principles of restorative justice. I'm a big supporter of a trauma-informed practice. So there are challenges in terms of police education, recruitment, training, deployment, which need to be addressed in order to be able to do these things. Primarily the need is to move away from the traditional, conventional law enforcement models, which is reactive, which is somewhat us versus them kind of an approach, as opposed to we are in it together, let us solve the issues, challenges together, and how can we as police be a support and a resource in solving those challenges. So there needs to be a shift in the mindset, shift in the philosophy of policing.
Yes, for sure. And because we're focusing on the indigenous population, we're talking about the Truth and Reconciliation.
Yes.
We're talking about Missing and Murdered Indigenous
Yes.
Women and Girls Report.
Yeah.
Are we going to see a lot more Indigenous engagement and a bigger police force?
Yes, I mean, there is no shortage of good recommendations. And people much more distinguished than me have done that. The Honorable Murray Sinclair, his report on police governance has extensive recommendations on how to provide better governance of policing in this city. He talks very strongly about the history of systemic racism of the city that needs to be challenged. He says if you don't do that, then you are guilty of willful blindness. He's very blunt in saying that. Then the report by the OIPRD, the Ontario Independent Police Review Director, called Broken Trust. Broken Trust again has 3 chapters in the report on racism and the need for the police to deal with racism. Long recommendations. You talked about Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report, TRC. Because of Broken Trust report and because of the Chief Coroner's inquest into the death of 7 youth, Indigenous youth, there were reinvestigations done of some of the old deaths that were not properly investigated. And both of them made recommendations on how to conduct investigations of missing people, of sudden deaths, of disappearances. So there's no shortage of good recommendations from very thoughtful people. The puzzle is why. I mean, I understand there was COVID and things kind of slowed down, but that is not an explanation for why there has been so little movement. And our focus as panel, we were appointed by the board, is to look at the role of the governance. What leadership role should the board be playing on behalf of the community to move policing in Thunder Bay in the direction that all these reports have pointed to? So we don't need to reinvent the wheel, as it were, but we need to provide advice on what actions the board, working with the service, and the community needs to take so that those good recommendations are put into action. So our interim report, I'm calling it a report to set the stage for real change. Interim report says you have some opportunity. You're going to select a new chief of police. You need to give priority to certain strengths, certain characteristics, certain abilities when you're looking for the new chief. You need to have a selection process that gives the highest priority to principles of equity, inclusion, of restorative justice, a selection process that is inclusive. It's not only board members, but there should be representation of the First Nations communities on the selection process, so that the new chief is somebody who can provide leadership, who has the ability to listen closely, who has an understanding of this community, who embraces values of restorative justice, understands trauma, values human rights, and provides that kind of a value-based leadership to policing. That's an opportunity. If the board does it right and selects the right leader for the police service, there is some hope and expectation that good things may happen, because so much depends in this hierarchical paramilitary organization, so much depends on the leadership, because the rank and file follow the direction that comes from there. The leader can make sure that they get the training, education, supervision, accountability that is necessary. Right? The second opportunity is the board itself. After this municipal election, there is going to be an entirely new board. That's an opportunity. If the people, powers that be, City Council, Queen's Park, OCPC, take the right measures, they can make sure that it's a board that represents the community, that is inclusive of the community, and that is driven, guided by certain core values and principles. Again, similar to the chief. And then you can hope to, and that establishes not just informal, once in a while consultation, but we are saying there needs to be a formal mechanism to hold the board accountable, for the board to engage with the indigenous communities on a regular basis, to establish priorities, seek advice, hold itself accountable. There needs to be more than a symbolic representation on the board itself. And in the interim report, we are talking about the strengths or the attributes that should be taken into consideration in choosing board members. Because often what happens, and I've faced that, having been chair of the Toronto Police Service Board for 10 years, that nobody knows how board members are selected. It's not a transparent process. Nobody knows on what basis. Is it who knows whom? Is it who recommends whom? How are people selected? So we need a transparent process that says, this is what we are looking for. These are the voices of the community we need to pay attention to. And based on the history of police governance here, these are the skill sets we need. We are also saying, have a full-time chair of the board, which means make sure that you pay them so that they can give full-time attention to the board. Because the issues here are so complex. that if people only come in when there's a meeting and then go away and the chair has other things to do and police governance is one of 10 things, you don't get the same focus, the same attention that is necessary given the state of policing in Thunder Bay. We are saying make it possible for the same chair and vice chair to be in office for 5 years so that there's stability and continuity. Because when you change chair from year to year to year, it is very difficult. It takes time for one thing. I can tell as a former board member, you need time to learn the ropes. You need time to make your connections. And only then you need time to set your priorities. Only then you can provide governance. Otherwise, you are simply dependent upon the bureaucracy. They tell you what to do and you rubber stamp it. And I'm afraid many people in Thunder Bay think that the board has been a rubber stamping body. It has not held the chief to account. It has seldom asked critical, tough questions when the chief comes and says, hey, this is what I'm doing. How many times has the board said, show us proof of what you're doing? You can only do that if you know what's going on. And you can only know if you spend time. So we are saying there's an opportunity right now. If these two things are done properly to create a new, committed, value-driven leadership for both the board and the service, if you put the right place in the board, like right people, there's some hope that all those good recommendations will actually get implemented. So we are very mindful that the challenges are big. The police service has a relatively limited number of people available at any given time, and people can be quite stressed out, can be burnt out, can be traumatized from the kind of policing challenges that exist in Thunder Bay. So they also need support. They need training, education, and support, understanding of what they are facing. The big thing that we are talking about among ourselves, and we have raised with some of the indigenous leaders of this city, as well as other people we have spoken to, something that we will deal with very fully in the final report, is the idea of a model of policing that is more collaborative, partnership-driven. Because we have the APS, we have the NAPS, there are these First Nations police services. We have the OPP in some of the communities. Why can it not be possible for Thunder Bay Police Service and Anishinaabe Police Service and Anishinaabe Police Service and OPP to develop a partnership model of sharing resources, working together, training together, making policing strategies together? Everybody has limited dollars. But if you collaborate and share and plan together, you maximize the money. You maximize your number of people available to do the work. You draw on each other's knowledge and expertise to learn from, to enhance your capacity. You build on your community connectedness if you do that. So we are, as a panel, we are talking very, very actively about another way of doing policing, community-based, value-driven, collaborative policing. But not only police agencies. In this city you also have, as you said earlier, You have got young people coming to go to school here. You have got young people, or people coming here for medical. You have people coming here for social services. You have people coming here for employment. And there are so many agencies, community-based agencies, mental health, health services, education services, social services, indigenous and non-indigenous. Why does everything have to be done by the police? Why does the police not create active partnerships so that some of these issues are not policing issues? They're dealt with by other services. And, in many communities, for example, there's a mobile crisis team, which is partly funded by the Ministry of Health, where you pair up a police officer with a mental health nurse, and they are out on the street. They respond. In other places, like right now in Toronto, it's happening. It's a 3-year pilot project where a number of community-based mental health agencies, including the Native Child and Family Services, have entered into a partnership with police so that when a call for help comes in and 911 and it is a call for somebody who is in distress, needs help, and there is no violence, there is no threat of weapons or anything, it's not the police that goes. They get help from these community-based mental health agencies. Why can we not look at those alternative models of delivering services? It's unlikely that the Thunder Bay Police will go from 300 to 500, but if you work closely with all these community-based agencies, you go from 300 to 500, but in a different way. So, those are the kinds of ideas that we are very actively talking about. To say that simply saying to this relatively small organization of 320 odd police officers and 150 odd civilians to do everything is probably not going to work as well as if this organization enters into active community-based partnership with many other organizations. So
That's great. And anything else that you would love to share with the people that we might have not have touched on?
One thing that I've said when we were here before is that the panel's hope is that the community will take ownership of our recommendations, because we are outsiders, we are here, gone tomorrow. But the pressure has to be kept up. And I know from my own days of activism in Toronto that it gets exhausting. That we knock at the door year after year after year. We may be heard, but we don't get the action that we expect. Nevertheless, we cannot give up. And my hope is that whatever little contribution we make will be owned by the community, and the community will hold the powers that be accountable. Because this has been too long. This police service and police board has come under more scrutiny than any other that I know of. It's time to get going.
Yes.
That's what I'd like to say.
For sure, because the importance of the Thunder Bay, of our police services is vital for,
Yes.
for every community, because they're the ones that can stand up.
Yeah.
They're the ones that can hold the guns. They're the ones that can enforce the rules,
Yeah.
especially on the people that we as community members, like the drug dealers,
Yeah.
the opiate crisis
Yeah.
that's happening here in
I mean,
Thunder Bay.
literally our lives depend on it.
Absolutely, and it's vital.
And the other thing, if I may,
Yes.
we need to stop thinking about policing, community safety and wellness in Thunder Bay as simply confined to the city of Thunder Bay. We need to think about Thunder Bay as the regional hub, that which is affected by the needs and realities of the northwestern region. This is the metropolis of northwestern region. This is where people come and things happen to them. So Thunder Bay needs to think of itself not just as city of Thunder Bay, but as that regional hub. And that's why my panel members and I are so passionate about a model of partnership across the region.
For sure, absolutely. Setting precedents for the rest of Ontario and probably even further, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important, especially for Indigenous people and
Yes.
where we stand as Indigenous
That's right.
people today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to keeping up to date, for sure.
And we'll make sure that you're kept up to date and look forward to spending time with you again when we are back in early 2023.
Chumigwit. Designated Waikamog, Anishinaabe Cause with NetNewsLedger here in Thunder Bay. Chumigwit.